Good morning. I'm so happy that all of you are here with us this morning. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. For the technicals, we are going to save all questions until the end, where all of your questions I would read out loud so that Coach can answer and address everything. During the presentation, you are allowed to send in your questions so they will be able to be read at the end. You will also be able to mute yourself so that we would have less feedback. This is a recorded line, so if you can please make sure that all of your microphones are muted in the background. And without further ado, let's get started this morning. Based on what transpired in a few short moments in early 26, Coach Jim Johnson is now an authority on the subject of realizing your dreams. In his many public appearances, the Rochester, New York resident relayed his role in basketball games that got Hollywood calling. He also emphasized the importance of teamwork and sportsmanship, delivering his talks with a heartfelt style that has brought audience to their feet. Coach Jim Johnson has delivered winning teams on and off the court for over 30 years. And this afternoon, we have him here with us to share some of his secrets on leading successfully by having answers to these 10 questions. Good morning, Coach. How are you doing this morning, sir?
Fantastic. We ready to go?
Sir, we are ready to go. We're all here and ready to hear the secrets that you got to these 10 effective questions that we need to answer.
Sounds great. I'm really looking forward to sharing it, and welcome to everyone. I appreciate you taking the time. And certainly as we move forward, as Regina mentioned, if you have any questions, we certainly would like to try to answer them. And if we can't in this program, we certainly would like to help you in the future in any way we can. So we'll have some information for you. To start, my leadership journey actually was a little bit of a struggle for me early in my life. I actually was a pretty good high school basketball player, went to college thinking I was going to be a great player in college, and got very humbled because in my second year in college, I got cut from my team. And I kind of went awry and really struggled in college for about a year. In fact, I kid people that I changed my major to partying, which I got very good at, but unfortunately wasn't helping my career in education, which I was going to try to get a degree in. Fortunately, I met a young lady my junior year that helped straighten me out. In fact, we're still together today. We've been married 36 years. And so when I got my act back together, when I graduated from college, I was really excited to become a varsity basketball coach. And my dream was to be a head coach in the area that I grew up, which is in Rochester, New York. I actually lived in a suburb called Greece, which is the largest suburb of Rochester. And after 3 years as an assistant, I got an opportunity to be a head coach at a local high school about 20 minutes from where I grew up. And I was excited. I thought I knew everything about coaching and leadership. I was going to lead this team that wasn't very good, from the outhouse to the penthouse in a very short period of time. And after our first two games, we were 1-1. I thought, oh, okay, I'm all right. And then with my great coaching acumen, I led that team to 17 consecutive losses. And it was a very humbling experience. And often, I'm sure that many of us have had adversity in our lives. And the key to being an effective leader, how do you respond to that adversity? Because early on I didn't respond very well, but after a couple of weeks of feeling sorry for myself, two things really blossomed for me. One was that I had a burning desire to show that school that I could be an outstanding coach, which fortunately I was able to do my many years after that. And number two is I realized that I was an arrogant 25-year-old that needed to learn a lot about not only coaching, but more importantly, leadership. And that's when I started my journey of studying leadership. And that's one of the great points I can give you right away, is that if you want to be great in anything, whether it's being an effective leader, a great parent, whatever it happens to be, you should put time investing in studying it to be the most effective person you can possibly be. And that's what I did. I started to read. I started to surround myself with better people. And I started this journey of success, and I was able to be a head coach again, and ended up, after 30 years struggling early in my career, I was able to turn it around, and fortunately had over 400 victories. And I was fortunate to be part of a real special story that we'll share a little bit at the end with a young man that was my team manager. But in moving on, so I came up in my journey in studying leadership. I've been doing a lot of leadership presentations as well as motivational presentations around the country. As I started to think about, what are the questions that effective leaders should be able to answer? And I came up with these 10, and I want to go through them and share some ideas with you of how I've answered them and stimulate your thinking of how you could answer them. So let's start first of all with what your expectations, what we're going to provide with you today. So Regina, if you can move on to the next one. And so our key leaning points, as you can see, is first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about how you should have a personal mission statement and give you some ideas on that. We're going to give you some ideas on not only how you can be an effective goal setter, but how you can teach your team, the people you work with and lead, to be more effective goal setters. Thirdly, we want to establish some balance in your life. It's something that's always a challenge, and no matter how much you're trying to get in balance, it's always going to be a challenge. But we're going to give you some ideas and some things to think about in creating balance in your life, and certainly giving you some understanding of what the most effective leaders are using to help them to be leading their teams or their organizations to be highly successful. So let's start with the first question. And we're going to start with the easy question, and then we'll move in with some more challenging questions. But the first one is pretty obvious in the fact that who is the first person you must lead? And of course, the answer is there for you. It is yourself. And as I mentioned, when I got fired from my first job, is that I realized that I needed to really realized that I had to lead myself better, because I think the best leaders are really clear about leading themselves before they can lead others. So I think it's immensely important as we answer these questions that you really are thinking about, how can I lead myself better, which will lead you to become a much more effective leader of other people. So let's go into the second question. And the second question is, which gets into the balance that we talked about, is how are you doing with living with your priorities? And when we talk about priorities, there's a lot of different areas, but we're going to share some areas with you of some things. So, for example, family, okay, would be a really important thing. And Regina, why don't we run down some of the things that we're going to do? So family is certainly essential to that. Our second one was your faith. The third one is your work. Your fourth is your health. Your fifth is giving back. And sixth is some of your major goals, which we'll delve into a little bit deeper in a couple minutes. So in doing that, I think the most important thing, let's go back to that first, Regina, those 6 values, in that the family, faith, work, health, giving back, and major goals are some things. And when you think about as a leader, are you a leader on and off the court as a basketball coach? And the fact that am I doing a good job being a leader in my family? How about am I practicing my faith? I believe strongly in God. I'm not going to preach to you here today, but I think it's something to think about. Do you have faith? The third thing is your work, and how can you be effective as a leader at work, but also in the other areas. And one of the other areas that I think we're going to delve into a little bit deeper is health, and the fact that I often see leaders that don't take time to care about their health, and that will lead to major issues for them as their life moves forward. And then we're going to talk about giving back and how can you leave your legacy? And then we're going to delve deeper into goal setting. So those are some of the things that I want you to think about, and you could add other things to work and life balance. But I think it's really important that you're constantly figuring out how you can balance your life to be the most effective leader. So moving on to our next question is, what are your top 3 values? And this is really going to link in with when we get into personal mission statement. So I want you to think for a moment, and if you got a pen and a piece of paper or pencil, right now think for just a minute and write down your most important value. And if you can put down your 3 most important values, because that's going to help you when we talk about how to develop a personal mission statement. So I want everybody just to think for a moment. And I hope that you were able to at least put down your most important value. I will share, when I started to do this exercise, my most important value was integrity. I wanted to live a life of integrity, that I would be a person that could be trusted, that I was trustworthy, and that I was going to say what I do and do what I say. Trust is so important in building a successful team organization. As a leader, you have to develop that. So I wanted to lead a life of integrity. That was my first one. The second thing is I wanted to be an outstanding role model. I wanted to be someone that people looked at, that I was going to lead by example at all times. And the third thing is I wanted to help others make their dreams come true. So I wanted to find ways that I could add value to others consistently. And certainly my teaching and coaching, now I get a chance to travel the country and share presentations and try to make an impact with that. I also have a book called The Coach in a Miracle, which you can check out on our site. Is a really powerful book on what we went through and all the lessons that we learned from that. But there are so many things to think about. But I think to be an effective leader, you got to really zero in on what are your most important values. And then more importantly, once you're clear about that, is to live them consistently, which is always a challenge. I know, but I believe the best leaders understand their values and live them to the best of their ability consistently, day in and day out. So let's move on to our next question. And the next question is, how are you using your time, talent, and treasure to serve others? We just talked about values, and I mentioned that one of my most important things is I wanted to find ways to help others make their dreams come true. And to do that, you have to serve and add value. I really am from the mindset of servant leadership, which I delve into more, and I probably will do a whole thing on servant leadership on another webinar. But the idea of how can I use my time? All right, so time, certainly I spend a lot of time with my profession. I spend a lot of time with my student athletes, trying to invest in them to try to help them be successful. Where are you spending your time? Now I spend my time between helping my family, the ability to, and enhancing my faith, as well as I continue to grow as a leader and trying to share leadership principles with people all over the country. And so how about your talent? We all have talents. Are you using them to be effective? I've always talked about finding your passions. One of my loves was basketball, and I had some talent there, but I really wanted to help people in that game, teaching the game of basketball, and I really became an expert in that because I studied so much about basketball and how I could then help my players with their talent. But how are you using your talent to serve others? And then certainly treasure is, are you finding areas that you can give money to? For me personally, I like to give money to my church because I'm very much into my faith. I also like to give money to autism groups. I've been supporting a local autism group called Autism Up here And I always like to help autism groups because of the story I was about with JMAC that's on the autism spectrum. And I really try to find different areas on how I can give back and use my money to help others. So I think those are things to think about today is how are you using your time, talent, and treasure to serve others? A very powerful question to ask yourself and then come up with the answers of what best fits you to be a servant leader. So moving on to our next question is, do you have your own personal mission statement in writing? Now, when I share my presentations around the country, when I ask this question, I find very few people that raise their hand and have a personal mission statement in writing. And I found as I started my study of leadership journey is that this was one of my life-changing events, is that when I discovered my personal mission. And a great question to ask yourself is, why were you put on this earth? You know, if you believe in the faith of God, why did God put you on this earth? But I think that's a great question to consistently ask yourself. And one of our expectations is that if you do not have a personal mission statement in writing, is that you take that as a homework. Now, how did I start? Going back to the values question, I put together my most important values, which I already shared with you, which was integrity in helping others make their dreams come true and being a role model. So this is my personal mission statement: to be an outstanding role model that makes a positive difference in the world by helping others make their dreams come true. What is yours? I think it's a really powerful thing, because when you are clear about your mission, I truly believe you'll become a much more effective leader. And here's why: because people will know what you stand for and what you're all about, and that will build trust because they know you're a person they can count on. You have a mission and you're living it. You know, in fact, I study a lot about businesses now, and I know one of the things that business is challenged with is keeping great people. And I've often heard, and statistics and studies show this, is that people don't leave their job, they leave their boss. That's you or me, the leader. So if they're leaving, there's probably a reason for that. And it goes back to, you know, how are you doing as a leader? Are you clear about your mission? And that's really one of the things we're going to strive for. Is your homework assignment is to add clarity to your life by having a personal mission statement. A second part of that is that most schools, businesses, organizations have a mission statement. But here's a couple things. When I took over basketball programs and we developed a mission statement for our basketball program, I would ask my players, I think it's really important to get feedback from your people to develop a mission. And the mission has got to be overriding. It can't be just that we're going to make profit. Okay, we want to make a difference in the world. And then by doing that, you'll become a profitable company. I truly believe that. So having a mission like that, when I ask my players, what should our program mission? The first thing they shared with me is, we want to win, coach. I said, well, I would like to win too, but it's got to be bigger than that. And after a lot of discussion, we came up with this, and that was we were going to develop winners on and off the court. Now, what is your mission for your team or your organization, or your business? And the most important thing is, you know, you can put it up on the wall. Those are nice, but is your team buying into it? And are they living it on a consistent basis? Because if they're not, then you're going to have some real issues. But I think it's really important to have an overriding mission for your organization or your team, something that everyone's going to buy into. And as the leader, you got to be sharing that and living that, not only your personal mission, but the team mission or organization mission on a consistent basis. So that's a really powerful thing as a leader, to make sure that you have clarity. And again, going back to answer that question, why were you put on this earth? Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next question. And this is one I spent a lot of time now. I share my keynotes. In fact, I do a whole workshop on goal setting because it is such an essential skill. And it's not something that people have not heard about. We've all heard about goals. But if you, again, studies say that less than 10% of the people in our country write their goals down. And I always teach people, I'm big on quotes. I used to give my team a quote every day. And one of my big quotes for goal setting is, when you think it, ink it. In other words, write it down. And what that does by writing it down is it adds clarity. Because one of my other quotes I often share is, you can't hit a target you don't have. So here's a couple ideas as far as goal setting. And I want to say one thing immediately. As a leader, it's so essential that not only that you are writing your goals down, but that you know what the people in your team or organization, what are their individual goals, and how can you support them so that they can accomplish their individual goals as well as accomplishing the team goals, and all working together for common goals. So I think that's essential to your success, whether it's an athletic team, a business, any type of organization, is that you're on the same page. And as a leader, I think it's so essential that you meet with your people individually and find out their goals and find out how you can sync them with the team goals or organization goals, and how you can support them. In fact, one of the questions I used to ask my team at the beginning of each week, I would ask my captains is, what are you working on and how can I support you? All right. And I think that's really important, that you get feedback consistently from your people. And goal setting is something that we can all do together. In fact, we used to meet as a team and we would go over our team goals, and then I would teach them about individual goals, and I would meet with every player so that there was clarity on what they wanted, how could I support them, and how could we all work together to accomplish our team goals. So in doing that, here's a few pointers that I share. Number one is writing out your 3 to 5 most important goals is another little homework assignment. You already got one with personal mission statement is I want you to take 5 cards or 7 cards. You can start with 3 most important goals or 5. And the first card I want you to write an index card is, I am responsible. Because as a leader, you have to take charge of your life. The second card I want you to put, I like myself. Because I think as a leader, I'm not saying you should be arrogant, not at all. I think the most effective leaders are humble, but they do care about themselves, because people that care about themselves, the best leaders then do a great job of caring about others. And then write out your 3 to 5 most important goals on index cards. And you could do that today. And then before you go to bed tonight, read those in front of the mirror, starting with, I am responsible, I like myself, and then writing out your goals. And do that in front of the mirror before you go to bed. Do it the next morning when you get up, and then try to do it in the middle of the day sometime, and then certainly before you go to bed. And I've done that for years. We taught our players, and it really adds clarity. What are your most important goals? And you should have different goals for different parts of your life. We talked about life balance. And so, I have health goals, I have professional goals, I have family goals, I have wealth goals. There's a lot of different areas that you can have goals in, and really making sure that you're clear of what's most important. Another thing that I started doing about 4 or 5 years ago that I think is a great discipline, because I believe the most effective leaders are finding ways to continue to add disciplines in their lives to help the people they lead add disciplines to their lives. And what I started doing is I got a spiral notebook. I put the date at the top. I usually do this one of the first things in the morning. And then I write out my 10 most important goals. I've been doing it every day. I've not missed a day for 4 years. And I think that's really important, is to put this little discipline, add clarity. And those goals, I write out our 12 to 18 months. I might have one real long-term goal on there, but they're goals that are a little bit short-term, but and some that are actually things I write out that I want to try to do every single day. Like for example, I meditate every day for a certain period of time. So those are things that you can write out and do that in a spiral notebook. I think that's really essential, is to have clarity in your life by writing your goals out. And then one last tip, I don't share too much of my keynotes, I do in my goal setting, but I'll give you a little bonus tip, is that as you're trying to accomplish your goals, I've found this activity to be very effective. It's called mindstorming. And what you do is you put your goal in writing, in a question at the top of a piece of paper. So for example, if I wanted to become a millionaire by the year 2025, for example, then you put that question up at the top. How can I become a millionaire by the year 2025? And then sit and think and try to put down 20 ideas. Now, some of them are going to be good ideas. Some of them are going to not be so good. And then try to do it again the next day. Try to come up with 20 and see if you can do it 3 days in a row. It's a very, very powerful technique that has really helped me immensely with some of my most important goals. So I think that's a great little technique to have your goals, to help them come to fruition, is to come up with a method, and it's a great methodology that you can do. Remember, when you set your goals, a little quote is, effective goal is a dream with a deadline. So you should put a deadline, and your goal should be written so clearly that a fourth grader could read your goal and completely understand what you're trying to accomplish. And with deadlines, if it comes to the deadline and you don't make it, then you have a couple choices. One, you change your goal, or two, you change your deadline. So, but I think having the deadline puts a little bit of subtle pressure on you, that you got to go to work, and work is always one of the great quotes about work is that the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary. So let's move on to the next question. The next one is, these are questions, the next couple, things that I think you've got to be intentional in your life. And I believe the most effective leaders have these in place. And we'll start with, do you have a personal wellness plan? Because I believe the most effective leaders have energy. And it's very hard to have energy if you don't take care of yourself. And I'm going to give you a few ideas that's helped me immensely. As I said, I want to be a great role model, so I want to keep myself in shape. I was a basketball coach for over 3 decades, and I wanted to be a great role model. In fact, I used to call it sweating with my players. When we went in the weight room, I would take them through a core workout, because I did do those a lot. And I think it's just a way. So I think the first thing, one of the things I've heard about and people I've talked about, is I don't have time to exercise. Well, I'm going to turn that around and say, I believe you don't have time not to exercise, because it will help so many ways and benefit. You'll have more energy. You'll feel better about yourself. Your self-esteem will rise because you're taking care of yourself better. So this is one of the bits of advice that I started many years ago, and I followed it, and it's helped me immensely. And that is to make an appointment with yourself. And I know some people, like my wife, she exercises pretty much every day in the morning. And that's where they're, like today, I exercise in the morning, but I don't, like tomorrow, I'm exercising in the afternoon. But what I do is I look at my week on Sunday and say, okay, there's a block of time, and I need at least 45 minutes to get at least a decent workout in. Now, I think a sidelight is if you can find things in exercise you really like to do. For example, I've picked up tennis in my last 10 years. I belong to a club. I play a lot of tennis. It's a great workout. So, some people love running. J-Mac, my man, runs a lot of marathons. We'll talk a little bit more about him at the end. But find something you really like to do, or few things you like to do, and there's some things you're not going to like to do. Like I do a core workout every other day because I used to have back issues, and it's helped me immensely. Now it's not something I'd love to do, but I know how much it benefits me. So taking care of yourself starts with, do you have an intentional workout plan that you do, and are you making an appointment with yourself? How about eating? Now, I'm not a nutritionist, but I will say that a lot of the studies are saying now that plant-based diet is much more effective than eating, meats and dairy and some of the other things. And, you can do your own studies, but I know that I've really been more conscious of eating better. I'm not perfect by any means. And another thing I learned, actually, I saw this on the Dr. Oz show, and I've been doing it for about the last 6 months. And I think I've missed maybe 1 or 2 days, but I try to be consistent, is what they call a 12-hour fast. And basically that is when I finish my last meal, like last night, I finished about 6:30. Well, I don't eat again until after 6:30 the next morning. So I found that to be a really powerful little way that you can do a fast. Another thing with your wellness, are you getting enough sleep? Something to think about. Are you getting consistent, going to the bed as much as you can about the same time, getting up about the same time? I think that's really important. How about meditation? It's something I started doing a few years ago, and I think it's helped immensely. Just sit quiet. I have a little tape that I use, and when I'm on the road, I'll actually just meditate in my room. I have a little ritual routine that I do, but I found it's been extremely beneficial. And there's certainly other things you can add, but the basics of making sure that you have a good nutritional plan, you're intentional, a good workout plan, find something you love to do, and then making sure you're taking care of your rest, because all the studies say that the less rest you have, least effective as a person and certainly as a leader you will become. So let's move on to the next question. And the next one is that, do you have a financial independence plan? And I'm going to share an idea that I did. And, I was a teacher and a coach, so I never made a tremendous amount of money. I mean, I lived comfortably. But when I changed my mindset, and I was listening to a guy speak on financial independence one day, and he said this, it hit me right between the eyes. If you want to be wealthy, you have to study wealth. And here I was, I think I was in my late 20s. I had a net worth of below zero, and I had no savings plan, nothing. And although I love teaching and coaching, and because we had some stipulations on how much we could make, I never made, a huge salary. But the same thing is that I developed through learning some different ideas of how I could be financially independent on the money that my wife and I made. And I developed this plan that I learned, and I've modified it some, but the basic of it was called the 70-10-10 plan. And 70-10-10-10 plan, I'm sorry. There were 3 10s in there. And basically what it is that for every dollar you earn, and of course we take taxes out, but after, every dollar you get, after taxes are gone, is that only spend 70% of that dollar. Now, we're in all different phases of our life. Most of us, if we have not developed any financial independence plan, cannot do that because you have too many different bills and things that you have to pay for. And it might be where you start off with 97, 1, 1, and 1, and that's okay, as long as you now are putting together a plan of how you're going to become financially independent. And when I put this plan into action in my early 30s, we're fortunate that with doing this consistently, we were able to accumulate a pretty large sum of money. And that's a very powerful thing that we all can do. Now, what are the 3 10s? We said we're only going to spend 70 cents every dollar you have. Well, it starts with, I believe, the more you sow, the more you reap. And in doing that, I think 10% should go and give back. So do you have a charity? Do you have multiple charities? Is it a church? And the tithing is 10% of your income. Are you giving back? So that was a great idea. And, I've have some charities that I donate to. I donate to my church. I find different ways, but it's, if you can think of every dime out of the dollar that I'm going to give back to some area that I can help benefit with my finances. We talked about that before, and serving others. But I think that's so essential. The more you give, the more you get. The next 10 cents is growing yourself. And we're going to talk about personal growth in a minute. But in doing that is that I believe you should invest in yourself. And to do that, buy books. I've got a huge library in my house of hundreds of books that I have. I've read, as I said, well over 1,000 books on leadership and success. I invest all the time in programs that I can listen to. I go to conferences. I pay for that. And as a leader, I think you should really encourage your people to go to areas where they can improve. You can pay for coaches yourself. I pay for various coaches to help me in my life. There are a lot of different ways, but invest in yourself. So use 10% of the money you make. And again, you may start with just 1% or less than that, but start to think about how you can grow yourself. And to do that, you have to put part of your money into that. But I think the huge thing that you get out of this is the more you invest in yourself, the more valuable you become to the marketplace. And when you add more value to people, that's going to increase the amount of money you can make in your salary and benefits. And then the other 10%, or the final dime, is coming up with a financial plan that you're going to invest in. You can call it a retirement plan. In teaching, it was a 403B. In business, it's a 401k. And I think it's important that you start putting away money like that you can do. And, I'm not here to share about investments because I'm not an expert on there, but I have studied it. I've read a lot of books about it. And I think the one thing I can give you advice in is be clear about understanding what you're investing. I'm fine about hiring a financial advisor, but understand if you're hiring a financial advisor, they are going to take some fees, and make sure that you know up front what you're going to be paying them for the ability to advise. In fact, I love fee-only planners where they just basically give you advice and recommend areas that you can put your money in. But you got to decide that, but make it a study. Learn the one's statement about finances and certainly in leadership is ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is devastation. So you need to not be ignorant. You got to learn. And as I talked to you early, or to be a great leader, you have to make it a study. And if you want to be financially independent, you have to study it and find different ways that you can invest your money. So the 70-10-10 plan was something, again, I didn't start out at 70-10-10. It was more like 97-1-1-1. But as I got better and really became much more cognizant of how I used my money, then my money grew, and I grew because I invested in myself. And I think that's so important as a leader, that you keep growing. The best leaders keep growing on a daily basis, because I truly believe you're either growing or dying. And I certainly don't want anybody to be dying. I want you to all be growing. All right, so that's enough about financial independence. Let's move on to our next one, and that is, do you have a personal growth plan? And I talk to a lot of businesses and schools, and when I talk to young people, I talk to colleges. In fact, I'm going to speak to a college in Minneapolis this weekend. And when I ask people about their personal growth plan, especially younger people, they kind of look at me with two heads. But I think that the most effective leaders are continuing to grow. I've already shared this, but I can't emphasize that enough. In personal growth, like some of the questions we just answered with financial independence and a personal wellness plan, is I believe the best leaders are intentional about this. I am an intentional plan. To give you an example, one of my goals I write out every single day is I'm going to invest at least 65 minutes and feeding my mind with positive materials. Now, how do I do that? I believe great leaders are readers. So I've read, as I said, well over 1,000 books. In fact, if you follow us on social media, we'll have our website up there. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And I do a book recommendation every week. And once in a while on a blog, I'll write out a number of books that I would highly recommend. And certainly if you want to reach out to us, we'd be glad to share some of the books that I think has helped me immensely in becoming a better leader. But I read a book a week on average, and as I said, I do a book recommendation every week, and I think it's so essential that you read. And just think of it this way, that if someone that had great success, and let's say them took them 20 years, as the famous adage is that it takes many years to become an overnight success, and those many years is hard work and diligence. And let's say that person, it took them 20 years to figure out how to be successful. They put it in a book that you can read in a week or less. Wouldn't that give you a great advantage to be a better person, a better leader, a better mother or father or brother or sister, or just a person in general? So I think that's really important, that you develop the habit to be a reader. Number two is, I'm assuming that many of you have a driver's license. How about have you turned your car or your vehicle into a library on wheels? And are you listening to audiobooks or seminars? Or in fact, you can learn a foreign language driving around. You know, we on average, we drive about 12 to 15,000 miles every year. So it's a lot of time in the car. So you turn your driving time into learning time. As a little adage, the more you learn, the more you can earn. So I think it's really powerful to continually to grow. And by turning your car into a library on wheels is a really powerful concept. And I'll give you one more idea, and certainly you can, actually I'll give you a couple. One more on this one is that I call it the 2-for-1. And the 2-for-1 is that, put in your ears a headphone with a program, some type of, I love listening to Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar, a couple of my favorites. But I've listened to a lot of different people share programs. But the 2-for-1 is like, if I go out for a run, I'll put my earphones on. If I'm doing some work, I'm cutting the grass, or I'm doing the dishes, or I'm just making the bed, whatever it happens to be, I'll have my headphones on. So I'm feeding my mind. So I'm doing something that I can do pretty easily with not a lot of thought. The same thing when driving, and yet I'm feeding my mind at the same time. So find different ways. And the other thing is that with a personal growth is, as a leader, what kind of people are you surrounding yourself with? Do you have a personal mastermind group? I have some mastermind calls I do every month that's helped me immensely. I do a lot now with my speaking. But I used to meet with people all the time about coaching. I would meet with coaches and we would share different ideas. And it's a really powerful concept to develop either mastermind calls or mastermind meetings where you meet with people. And I always thought, when I talk to young people, but I think anybody listening, are the people you're associating with, are they helping or hindering you as a person? Are you a more effective person because of the people you're around, a more effective leader, or are these people hindering you? Because if they're hindering you, then I think it's something that you really got to think is, I got to cut some of these people out of my life or spend a lot less time with them. Because the people that are enhancing what's going on, you got to get more of them around you, because it is so important. Peer pressure is powerful. I know we talk to young people all about that, but examine your own life. How are you doing with that? And I think the most important thing I can share about personal growth is that it's got to be intentional. As I mentioned before, you're either growing or dying, and we want everybody to be growing. We want to keep getting better. As my leadership philosophy, I call it leave a profit, is that everything we touch, we want to get better, not worse. So I think it's really important that you have this growth plan and you keep finding different ways that you can feed your mind and getting more valuable and being able to add more value to the marketplace. So let's move on to our final question for today. And this question is what are you doing in your life to leave a living legacy? And as we move on to the next slide, I'll share a little bit about how we've done with living a legacy. So that, Regina, why don't we move on to the next slide? And what have I have done, and how am I leaving a living legacy? Well, as some of you may be aware that on the webinar, some of you may not, that back 13 years ago, I had a young man that was in our basketball program. His name was Jason J. Mac McElwain. And Jason is on the autism spectrum. And back in high school, he tried out for our basketball team for 3 consecutive years, not making it, but serving as our team manager for 3 years. In his senior year, I wanted to give him a gift. And I told him that although he was not quite good enough to be on the team, that the gift was I was going to put him in uniform for our final home game, which we call senior night. And I was going to hopefully get him in the game. Well, with just over 4 minutes to go, I felt the time was right, and I got him in his first varsity basketball game. The first time he touched the ball, he shot a 3-pointer. The crowd stood in anticipation. It missed by like 6 feet. But what I really admired about Jason is that he took in, one of the things we taught our players is next play, the ability to move on, learn from your mistakes, but to move on, because the game of basketball is a pretty fast-moving game. And he illustrated, I know a lot of kids, if they shot an air ball the first time they got in, would probably not shoot again. Well, that wasn't going to stop J-Mac. So the second shot he had was actually a much closer shot. He hit the backboard, hit the rim, and it fell off. And I thought to myself, all right, God's starting to listen. We're getting closer. And the third shot he had was a 3-pointer again. And this time he made it. The place exploded. And I thought to myself, God must be a basketball fan. Not only has J-Mac scored, but he's got a 3-pointer. It can't get any better than this. Well, it did. Jason, for the next 3 minutes, as I kid people, turned into his boyhood idol, Kobe Bryant. And he started making shot after shot. And when the smoke had cleared, Jason was our leading scorer for the night with 20 points, including 6 3-pointers, which tied the school record at the time. And he did that in less than 4 minutes. It was truly incredible. As I mentioned, I wrote a book about it because it actually was a very difficult season that Jason was one of our major rocks to help us through a lot of adversity. I read about it in the book, Coaching a Miracle. And as you can see from the slide, the thing ended up blowing up. Magic Johnson came to our school. You see that. He was involved in some of the movie, although right now we don't have a movie deal. We're hoping that'll be reignited someday. You can see that Jason was actually, his number was retired my last year in coaching, number 52. It hangs on the wall at Greece Athena High School. And so that was part of my legacy. But the other thing that I think is really important, as I mentioned a little bit about servant leadership, is the ability to grow other leaders. I think that's so essential to be an effective leader. And I'm really proud that I retired from coaching 3 years ago. And I spent a lot of time with my assistant. His name was Coach Setzer, and he took over for me. It took me like 20 years to get to our first Section 5 championship game. And Coach Setzer, in his first 3 years, had made the finals 3 consecutive years. Now he hasn't won one yet, so I got a little bit ahead on him because we were fortunate to win 6 in my career. But I've been still mentoring him, and I'm really proud of how he's kept the program. And I think he'll take it to another level. He's just a really bright guy that has a lot of ambition. But I think it's hugely important as a leader in leaving your legacy. Are you developing people? And I think that's the most important thing, making your mark. You know, like right now, I get a chance to travel around and and touch people with my stories. And I think it's a really powerful thing. I'm involved with organizations. I'm always trying to support and help make the world a better place. So think about, well, how are you leaving your legacy? I think it's so essential that you think of ways and how not only you continue to grow yourself, but are you growing other leaders, so that when you leave your organization, whatever you're doing is going to be better off because you've trained people and even be better after you've left because you've done such a great job of developing leaders. So let's wrap up, and then we'll have some questions with people. So as we wrap up with that, and one of the things that my little theme line on my dreams really do come true speech is the best way to have your dreams come true is to help others make their dreams come true. And we just talked about that in servant leadership. I think that's a really powerful thing. Another thing is we'd love to share your goals with us. I have what we call a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And that's a goal that just supersedes everything else. And the most important thing I want you to know about a BHAG is, and having a big goal is you got to make sure that you keep the people involved that are most important to you. That if it's a big goal, making sure that your family's aware of it and how you can support them and they can support you, or your team of people that you're working with at work. So because it's very hard to have a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, come to fruition without the support of the people that care about you. So make sure that you include them in your life. It's so essential in making that come true. We'd love to hear about your BHAG or your other goals, as well as do you have a personal mission statement, anything else that you'd like to comment. Certainly you see you can reach out to that email there, and we'll be glad to get back to you. And also, let's talk about our key takeaways, and then we'll take some questions. So remember, our goal is that if you don't have a personal mission statement, you're going to do that. We talked about some various ways that you can use goal setting. Remember, as a leader, that you want to know what the people you work with, their individual goals, and how you can support them and help them as you accomplish your team goals. Remember, we talked about another homework assignment that you're going to put the cards starting with I am responsible, I like myself, and writing out the goals. Thirdly is making sure with your goals that you're establishing balance in your life. Be intentional. Some of the things we talked about, a personal growth plan, a personal wellness plan, a financial independence plan. Some of the things that you got to be intentional about in having life's balance. Are you taking care of your family? And as I always mention, on and off the court. Are you a winner on and off the court? And I think we shared some powerful ideas of what the most effective leaders are using. Again, starting by leading yourself, I think is just a really important thing. So in closing, we'd love to answer any questions. We've got a few minutes left. And again, if you want to reach out, you've got our email, and there's my website. We have a free newsletter, and we will have a recording. If you're a newsletter follower, we will send you a recording in our next newsletter. I do a weekly blog that you can do. That's complimentary as well. And we do have a discount on our book right now, so if you'd like that. So, Regina, do we have people
yes,
that have
Coach.
questions? So, go ahead.
We have a lot of questions, actually. One of the first ones that came in was, what is the biggest challenge facing leaders today?
Okay, great question. I think the biggest challenge with leaders today is communication. And communication is you got to have a process of how you're communicating, because I think the area where there's a breakdown, where you don't have success with your team, your organization, is trust. And the only way that you can build trust, in fact, I talk about that in one of my leadership keynote, is that you got to have a methodology of building trust, because trust is like building a bank account, and the more you put deposits in, the better, bigger, and stronger that account. But if you're constantly taking withdrawals out, but there's one caveat to building trust, is that you can destroy trust with one really bad decision where you may never get it back. Like, I give an example. When I was leading my team, I would share with our players and our parents that I would not drink alcohol during the season because I wanted to be a great role model. And although I didn't have to do that, but if I said that and then 2 weeks later I got a DWI, what do you think that would have done to the trust? It would have absolutely destroyed it. So I think it's really important. The biggest challenge I see is the ability to communicate and build that trust in your team or organization.
Another one of the questions, Coach, that we had, these are really great questions, is what advice would you give someone going into a leadership position for the first time?
Well, I would start with is that I think you have to, number one, study as much as you can about what the important elements of that leadership position. Number two is that I think you really should strive to get a mentor or mentors that can help you as you get involved in that leadership position. And certainly the other thing is when you get into a leadership position, I think it's so important that you meet with the people on your team individually, find out their goals, find out about them. Is the old adage, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So building relationships, I think, is so essential to being an effective leader.
Here's a good one, Coach. It said, what is one mistake you witness leaders making more frequently than others?
I think the simple answer for that would be that I think it's so essential that leaders lead by example, and I think we have breakdowns. We used to tell our players and our staff all the time that we are always on stage, that people are always watching you as a leader. So I think when you say one thing and do something else, as we mentioned before, that breaks the trust. So I think it's really important that you understand that you are always on stage and how you lead on a daily basis and being the rock and not to be someone that just loses control, I think is so important in leadership.
You have, let's see, it says, how do you ensure your organization, I guess is your job, and its activities are aligned with your core values?
Well, I think in developing your core values, your group mission statement, I think it is so essential that number one, that you do get feedback from your team or your group of people that you work with. I think that's so essential because when you're buying into that mission and those core values, there got to be things that you are consistently living with. And as a leader, I know I'm being redundant here, but it's so important that if the core values, for example, if the core value is integrity and then you're lying all the time, you're not holding up your, and just simple things like if you're expect your people to be on time, yet you're late all the time, that's going to crush, your core values and what your mission's all about. So I think it's really important that you're consistent with your core values and that you're reminding your people, I think as a leader, of what your mission is all about and what the core values, but living it as a leader is where it all starts.
Okay, here's our last and final question, Coach. It said, can you name a person who has a tremendous impact on you as a leader? Maybe someone who has been a mentor to you, and they're asking why and how did this person impact your life?
Well, I'm going to give you one on and off the court. And unfortunately, I did not meet either one, but I read a number of their books. I've listened to, with one of the guys, their audio programs all the time. I still do today. And the other gentleman, I've talked to people that have met Coach Wooden, so we'll start with him, the former UCLA great coach that won 10 national championships the last 12 years. I've read so much about him, and one of my personal speaking friends, Don Yeager, did his last, John Wooden's last book, Don did with him. And so I have picked Don's brain a lot about Coach Wooden, and I've read a number of his books. So he would be, from the coaching standpoint, because he lived what he talked about every day. And I thought it was really neat. He never talked to his players about winning. He always talked about doing your best and, establishing those core values. And then as a personal development guy, the late, great Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn, I've read a bunch of his books, but I listen to his audio programs. I still do all the time in my car. I have one of his programs on my iPod, and I'm always trying to feed my mind. I've learned so much about being a better person, leader from the late, great Jim Rohn. And I think one thing I'll say is I think it's hugely important to study some of the great leaders and people that can help you. If you can meet them personally and they become a personal mentor, I think that's even better. But there's so much now with audio programs, video programs, and books that you can be mentored out of these people and actually never met them, as I never got a chance to meet Coach Wooden or Jim Rohn, but I've learned so much from both of them.
Well, that wraps it up for today, Coach. I think this was a really great lunch and learn. We had a lot of people on here today. We had about over 45 people on here this morning, and a lot of great questions and everything. This will be recorded. As a registering for this webinar, you are placed on the newsletter listing, so you can look forward to receiving the recording of the webinar through the newsletter. Is there anything else you want to leave with the audience before we sign off right now today, Coach?
Yeah, I just like to finish with, those questions. I think the thing I want to leave is that I want you to really think about, your purpose. Why were you put on this earth? And then secondly, how can you leave a legacy? And to me, that's a servant leadership mode, in that how can you develop others and grow others? I think that's so essential. So think about how can you grow yourself and how can you grow others?
All right, that wraps it up. I wish all of you a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, Coach, for your time that you gave to us today and giving us all his insider secrets to being an effective leader and having answers to these 10 questions that would help us in our daily lives. You have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you, Coach. And that wraps it up for today.
My pleasure. It was great to do it.